What remains at the end of time? What persists, clinging on to a dying universe, as the strands of reality begin to burn away and leave only ash in their place? The Dark Souls series has never been one to shy away from such existentially dreading questions like this, and the Dark Souls 3 DLC, The Ringed City, faces this inquiry head-on. Being presumably the final installment into the monumental franchise, The Ringed City has a lot to achieve. Not only must it deliver an entertaining experience for the player, as any DLC should, but it also must strike the final nail into the coffin of Dark Souls as we know it. Both of these I believe it fulfills. As part of a joint video project with the lovely Rose GX, we are clashing against one another to truly determine which of the Dark Souls 3 DLCs is the best. And as you've probably assumed, I will be arguing in favour of the Ringed City, while Rose asserts Ashes of Ariandel's supremacy. To keep this uniform as possible, we're following the same argument structure, level design, bosses, and a third secret option that we can both pick irrespective of each other's third point. That also means that if you want to see the entire discussion, you'll need to watch both of our videos. Rose's channel will be linked in the description. With all the prefacing out of the way, let me tell you about why the Ringed City is the undeniable best DLC Dark Souls 3 has to offer. The Ringed City, which I will begin to abbreviate as TRC from now on, contains two main areas. The Drag Heap, containing 4 sub-locations, and the Ringed City itself, containing 8. This is a massive step up from Ashes of Ariandel, having only 6 sub-locations to explore. TRC doubles this number, with each area being as vast and intricately detailed as one could hope for. Beginning in the Dreg Heap, we encounter one of the most vertically inclined levels in all of Dark Souls, on par with the old Iron King DLC from the second game. To navigate this, a new mechanic is implemented, these being the ash piles you can land in, negating all fall damage. From Software does 2 things to get players accustomed to the change of level. The first is developer messages directly telling you to jump down. These are accompanied by an apparition of Gale pointing downwards with a torn piece of cloth from his cloak, indicating where to go. The second comes in the form of a trap. When walking across a brick outcropping to collect an item, the brick crumbles and leaves you falling, smashing through the window of a sunken tower and landing in an ash pile. At this point, many players will have grasped just how far you can fall and still be saved by the ash piles, eliciting a new form of play. Instead of looking around to explore, players will begin to look up and down for secrets, to see if any hidden items may have slipped down the crevices of this dying land. Aside from all the technical stuff, it's a pretty fun mechanic to just throw yourself off of massive ledges and not pay the consequence. If you take a moment to look around you at the harsh imagery of this place, land folding in on itself, buildings crumbling around you, ash covering the floor and floating in the air like a nuclear fallout, angels littering the sky, you really get the sense that this is it, this is the end of the universe. It's visual storytelling like this that just shows how impactful this DLC will be, especially when compared to the lackluster, barren snowfields of AOA. Moving past the opening segment and you'll find yourself in yet another poison swamp. I was speaking to my friend about this recently, and at what point do we just accept that poison swamps are just part of the From Software formula? I get that they suck to play through, but they feature in nearly every FromSoft game. It's obviously intentional. Miyazaki himself has stated that he just can't control the urge to add more poison swamps into each game. I hold the opinion that they're quite iconic at this point, and they do hold some functionality in play. How do you combat a player that's mastered rolling and can one-shot most enemies? You slow them down and drain their health whilst they try and breeze past the level. I mean, isn't the initial allure of Soulsborne's games their difficulty? But I digress. The Overgrown Swamp is a callback to Dark Souls 2, being a degraded version of Earthen Peak, even featuring a rogue desert pyromancer. And though it's further down in the Dreg Heap, the boss arena for the Demon Prince fight is a torn up Firelink Shrine from the original Dark Souls. Again, this plays into the theme of time folding in on itself, creating a large dreg of the universe. Dreg being defined as the sediment left in liquid, or the most worthless parts of something. As you descend down the Dreg Heap, you begin in the Ashen Lands of Dark Souls 3, Earthen Peak from Dark Souls 2 and Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls 1. You're physically travelling through time, through the epochs of the Dark Souls universe, tying all the former games into one mesh of a level. After beating the Demon Prince, you get a small envoy banner. Hoisting this on a cliffside will trigger 3 Batwing demons to carry you to the Ring City itself, mirroring how you first travel to Anor Londo in Dark Souls 1. The first shot we get of TRC is stunning, living up to Dark Souls' history of grand location reveals. The Ring City, the location not the DLC, offers a significant variety of level design, with the Outer City, the Swamp, Midir's Cliffside, the Tower of Rebirth from Berserk, the church, and both Gale and Midir's arenas, forming the area as a whole. The Outer City keeps a good mix of inside and outside exploration, whilst keeping up the gorgeous visuals. A lot of the flooring is covered with these white flowers, reminiscent of the area for Snake's fight against the boss in Metal Gear Solid 3, especially when the first Ring Knight slowly walks towards you for a duel. I think it's important to note the symbolism here. White flowers are most commonly used during funeral or memorial services, representing tranquility and rebirth, an adequate choice of flora for the death of the universe. The swamp just outside of the overgrown urban streets is possibly the best swamp in all of Dark Souls. Not only is it properly stylized, but it does not poison or slow you down. Bravo From Software, another masterpiece. Progressing through and you'll find that the bonfires of this area have greater interconnectivity than one may expect, though I didn't get any footage of this recorded because I'm cracked and I didn't need to do any runbacks. Despite that there aren't any new mechanics introduced like in the Drag Heap, the Ring City provides classic areas, but refined to a much grander scale. There isn't much to say about the beginning locations, other than they're pretty cool. Crossing over a sunken building, you'll reach the cliffsides, where Dark Eater Midir will swoop down and breathe fire onto you. You can find nooks and crannies carved into the mountainside to cower away from the inferno, or you can drop onto bits of rock. Either way, you're forced into a mad dash to avoid taking damage from the dragon. Though this segment is short, it's memorable, and one of the few times you're rendered powerless to your surroundings, as if the level itself is antagonistic towards you, not just a neutral battleground for PvE combat. The Tower of Rebirth is again another short but unique location. With its spiraling corridors, you can very easily get lost in here, wrapped up pacing the crumbling staircases. Your penultimate meeting with Midir happens just after. He guards a bridge you must cross to reach the church, again setting into the mindset of the player that this place is hostile and will do all it can to stop you from reaching Princess Filianor, who I haven't really mentioned, but she's very important. It just doesn't have much to do with the level design. Travelling by, you reach one of the coolest non-boss theatres for a face-off against a dual-wielding Ring Knight, overlooked by the Church of Filianor, which is a great display of Gothic architecture. And excluding the boss arenas, which we'll discuss in the next section, that is the areas of the Ring City. Not only does TRC outperform AOA in terms of quantity, but vastly ups the quality of level design. The sheer diversity of terrain offered alone should be enough for any Souls player to see TRC's superiority in this department, but it doesn't need to do it alone. Each location serves its purpose and more. The intricate detailing of every building, the refinement of previous tropes with the atmospheric setting of TRC, aided tenfold by remarkably strong art direction. Just sitting within the DLC, you can feel the message the dev team wanted to express, seeping with style and visual storytelling. The tying in of previous entries, matched with providing an entire city to answer the burning question of the pygmies' placement within the lore. It may sound like I'm dick riding the Ring City, and that's because I am. I love playing through this DLC. There's never a part where I feel unmotivated to carry on, because the low points, the angels and the poison swamp, are kept inside their boundaries and don't overstay their welcome. In fact, the swamp is fully skippable if one would wish to. With all that said, when you look at its competitor, what does AOA have to show? Snowfields, sparse forest, frozen lake and a dilapidated village. It would be an understatement to say that AOA pales in comparison to TRC. Keep in mind that both of these DLCs are sold for the exact same retail price. It's missing the variety, the breadth, the identity, and the essence of the Ringed City. We've already had a snowy painted world level. We've already had a snowy DLC in the Crown of the Ivory King. And Dark Souls 3 already had a snowy area that was done 1,000 times better than Ariandel. How many more times do we need a sterile and desolate snow location? This is all without mentioning how small and cramped each area is. There's just no breathing room to allow AOA to deliver a much more complete experience. You know, I wish Ariandel could have been better, to have some noteworthy assortment of its level design. Maybe make the chapel grander, transforming it into more of a level than a point of interest like we saw done in Elden Ring. Or add more in the way of exploration, instead of an empty land with some items scattered around, strong-arming you into travelling from Bonfire A to Bonfire B. It really does feel like AOA was meant to be a location in the base game, but was amputated during production, and stuffed behind a £12 paywall. Ashes of Ariandel would be amazing if it had more to offer, but it just falls flat. And when compared to the Ring City, it's completely blown out of the ash pile. When you think of tough fights in Dark Souls, what comes to mind? For many, this list will include demons, dragons, sword-wielding adversaries, and PvP invaders. The Ring City has them all. Being stocked with double the amount of bosses that Ashes of Ariandel offers, I can confidently say that the Ring City hits the mark on almost every single one. I may even be as bold to say that 3 out of 4 of them are contenders for the best bosses From Software have ever put out. These endurance fights are genuinely the peak of Dark Souls for me. This is the result of 8 years of practice, 8 years of honing their craft, crystallized into sequences of pure brilliance. They are demanding both mechanically and mentally, pushing the limits and raising the bar for the standard of bosses From Software can deliver. This next segment will take on each boss one at a time, analysing them and arguing their dominance over the questionable bosses AOA has to show. I'd also like to add that during the boss fights I was making a tier list of Minecraft mobs with my friends. You can watch it on the second channel. But this means that I was a little distracted and not playing my A game for the footage. 2 of these bosses are easily 10 out of 10, with another being a solid 9, and unfortunately, the remaining boss does kinda suck. But for those who argue that a team is only as strong as its weakest link, you have simply not played the Ring City. Starting with the first boss of the DLC, the Demon Prince is 2 genres of FromSoft bosses rolled into one, both executed nearly flawlessly. The fight begins as a 2-on-1, with you facing off against the demon in pain and the demon from below. Aggression is split between the two, with one dealing quick physical attacks and the other being more passive and ranged, shooting toxic mist across the arena. The fighting style is reminiscent of Ornstein and Smough from Dark Souls 1, Ornstein being quick but dealing less damage, and Smough being slow but dealing more damage. In a 1v1 these enemies wouldn't be too hard to take down, but when they're combined, they create a formidable duo, forcing the player to keep on their toes and consider both attack patterns whilst fighting. Throughout the battle, the demons will switch roles, indicated by the demon stopping its attack to absorb more power. Whilst this is an opportune tune to punish, you can get caught in the bleed over, where both demons are in their aggressive state, so it's really a gamble on how well you think you can take on both enemies. The arena for this boss is massive, however the toxic attacks do a great job at crowd control, forcing you to play on their terms by limiting your movement, and making the conflict seem much more claustrophobic than it is. This first stage is the epitome of the Dark Souls mantra, hard but fair, breaking out of the cycle many gank fights find themselves in, by having this turn-based aggression style. Adding to this, they don't take much to stagger, so getting a couple of riposte attacks in will speed up the first phase immensely. To advance to the second stage, both demons must be killed, so it's no use sinking all of your resources into taking out a single demon. Instead, you have to play smart and distribute your Esters across all 3 enemies. Speaking of the third, following an AoE attack with a really cool animation, the Demon Prince is born out of the corpses you've created. Depending on which demon you killed last, or first, it doesn't really matter, there's 2 of them. Hi, I'm interjecting with an editor's note. Okay, so, I realized how many times I say demon in this section. So, in my infinite wisdom, I decide to abbreviate Demon Prince to DP. I was unaware until like maybe a couple minutes ago that DP has a second meaning. If you don't know what DP means, then please just watch the video, ignore this segment. But if you do, then I sincerely apologize, and I'm asking for you to pull your mind out of the gutter for like 2 more minutes. I'm so sorry. Anyways, back to the video. The DP changes its moveset. This is possibly the only instance of a boss changing its fight due to your prior actions. The closest example I can think of this is King Vendrick from Dark Souls 2, losing defense if you spent time gathering souls of giants. DP has a staggering 14 different possible attacks. For comparison, the 3-stage Sister Fried fight has 1 less attack than this behemoth of a creature. The DP can fly, slam into the ground, shoot lasers, summon fireball showers, spew lava, and more. The DP is by far the strongest entry into Dark Souls' long list of demon bosses. Not only are you facing the combined strength of your previous enemies, but you're lower on resources than when you started. For many players, the panic will start to set in. The Demon Prince sets a new benchmark for 2-on-1 fights, a benchmark that FromSoft themselves haven't hit. Compared to the Godskin duo or the Valiant Gargoyles from Elden Ring, they don't hold a candle to how well telegraphed and executed this fight is. 9 out of 10. Half-Light Spear of the Church is by far the weakest of the roster. In fact, most of the time you won't even be fighting the actual boss. A lifted concept from Demon Souls' old monk fight, other players are meant to serve as the antagonists for this fight, being summoned as if it was a PvP invasion. If you join the DLC exclusive Covenant, the Spears of the Church, you can too become the invader for other people's Half-Light fight. This makes a very mixed experience. Either you summon some poor soul who's inept at PvP and you stomp them first try, or you get an Omega Sweatlord who's dedicated their entire build to make your life hell. I should note that invaders are unable to use Estus during the fight, which makes the matchup a little fairer. However, they can use healing items and miracles if equipped. It's a cool concept and homage to Demon Souls, but in practice it doesn't perform as well as one could hope. Half-Light, the boss you'll fight if you're offline or unable to find an invader, isn't that great either, being a glorified NPC invader. His moveset is pretty varied, possessing spells, a katana, and a bow, almost like a prototype of Genichiro Ashina from Sekiro. He's able to riposte and parry you like an invader would, but apart from that, it's nothing special. I forgot to mention there's painting guardians that also spawn throughout this fight. There's just not much to say about Half-Light. 4 out of 10.
What? Still here? Hand it over, that thing, your dark soul. For my lady's painting.
Slave Knight Gale is by far one of the best bosses From Software have ever created, and in my personal rankings, he's my second favourite. Breaking away from the respawning boss fights, Gale offers 3 stages all within one massive health bar, a method I much preferred to 2 or 3 smaller health bars that refill at the beginning of each stage, as they often feel a little bit cheap. The first phase will see Gale acting more bestial, running around on all fours, jumping and lunging at you with a smoothness that makes his greatsword feel like an appendage rather than a chunk of metal that he must wield. I think the animation department did such an outstanding job with Gale. It makes it come across that you're fighting more of a creature than a man. His legs are out of time with his arms, often tricking players into mistiming his attacks, believing he's much quicker than he is, and adding to the general body horror of it all. The scream into rapid 5-part attack is tough at first, but once you get the timing down, it feels so good to pull off. I cannot overstate the gratification you'll get from learning his attack patterns. Speaking of, Gale is packing 16 different attacks, one of the broadest ranges in the series. After removing a third of his health bar, you enter stage 2.
Is this the blood
A cutscene plays, Gale goes hollow, everything is building up to this moment, and then the music kicks in. Transformed from a cowering beast, Gale now stands as a Goliath, his red hood dripping with the souls of those he's killed, and prepared to add you to his list. His cape now acts as a tracer to his sword swings, meaning if you dodge just too early, you'll get caught, and if you dodge too late, you'll get hit with both, demanding near perfect movement from the player if they don't want to be caught by the red hood. The fabric, as expected, has a curve to it when it's spun around, so to minimize the risk of you getting hit, you should roll towards him, although this comes at the cost of always being in close quarters with the swordsman. Gale begins to use his repeating crossbow and Way of White Corona miracle, increasing his moveset to include some long range attacks. That's if you don't count him hurling himself across the arena to stab you long range. You do not get a second to breathe throughout this phase, unless you get enough hits off to stagger him, and even then, he's up pretty quickly afterwards. There's something so great about humanoid boss fights, basically ripping off a Point H Bomber guy made in his Dark Souls 2 video, but there's a certain feeling you get when beating a foe at the same level as you. You aren't toppling the odds in an underdog story, one will come to learn very quickly, but we're clashing swords with someone with the same limitations as you. It's a battle of pure skill rather than exploiting the weaknesses of a larger enemy, like running under their legs or staying behind them the entire fight. Gaping dragon, I'm looking at you. There's a reason that Atorius the Abyss Walker, the Nameless King, Dancer of the Boreal Valley, Fume Knight, and the Looking Glass Knight, just to name a few, are hailed as some of the best bosses in the series. Removing another third of Gale's health and you enter his third stage, indicated by an AoE attack. This stage is by far the best part, and I'm going to struggle to put a lot of this into words, but this fight is pure unfiltered Kino. Just listen to the soundtrack for this part. The violin cutting into the bellowing choir is just so fucking good. Gale now fights out of pure desperation. Leap attacks over you whilst dispensing bolts from his crossbow, lightning striking the arena you fight on. The harmonies of a voiceless crowd calling out to you in the ashen plains, whilst Gale is unrelenting, throwing himself towards you and slashing quicker than ever. It's attack combo into attack combo into attack combo. It's Kino. It's so unbelievably Kino. I have no better word to describe this. I get so excited and happy when I get to talk about this fight, because it's so good. As your sword connects its hit to the final chunk of his health bar, Gale is defeated, dropping to the floor with his arm outstretched, giving us the soul of Slave Knight Gale and the blood of the Dark Soul. This is an apt time to discuss the lore of Gale, because I think it adds just that bit more to an already outstanding boss. In the ages of old, when Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, waged his war against the ancient dragons, there existed a sect of his army that had gone forgotten, not praised like the Black and Silver Knights of Anor Londo, but pushed to the side. These were the Slave Knights. The item description for the Slave Knight set reads, "Armor issued to Slave Knights. The fine craftsmanship of this made it a symbol of honor. Long ago, only the undead served as slave knights, warriors used as fodder in the bleakest of battles. They grew decrepit, their skin charred black and their bones twisted. Eventually, they went outright mad, but were never relieved from duty. Being burdened with the dark side by Gwyn himself, the undead were reborn over and over again after death, the perfect fit for an expendable army. Gale himself was one of these undead slave knights, meaning that he's existed since the birth of time and has persisted till the end. We know that Gale was alive during Gwyn's time as he utilizes the Way of White Corona miracle. A lost Way of White miracle launches a white discus which slices into foes and returns to its conjurer. Long ago, when the imprints of gods were still deep, miracles of the Way of White existed alongside Arolas. This next bit is heavily credited to Reddit user Murgos Nanny. Thank you for all your great work. The Way of White Corona is a miracle that had been lost to time, belonging to a covenant that met the same fate. As time comes to a close, even the painted worlds begin to rot. Within Ariandel, a Corvian settler tells us this.
O wondrous ash, this world away, my lady must see flame. And you have only to show her. Surely you've seen the rot that afflicts our world, but that which fooled the good father and buried the flame, after we had all made up our minds too. So, please, grant us one wish. Make the tales true, and burn this world away.
To create an escape and disobey the leadership of Father Ariandel, a new painted world must be imagined, but this time it must be permanent, as the outside world is crumbling. If the player has the King's Crown, the Crown of the Sunken King, the Crown of the Old Iron King, and the Crown of the Ivory King when entering Vendrick's memories in Dark Souls 2, he says this:
"One day fire will fade, and dark will become a curse. Men will be free from death, left to wander eternally. Dark will again be ours, and in our true shape, we can bury the false legends of yore. Only, is this our only choice?"
From this we learn that humans can survive in the Age of Dark. If anything, they'll rise to power and flourish. Men will take their true shape. So what if the new world could use the pigment of the Dark Soul to paint, separate from the Age of Fire that must be rekindled each epoch? This is the mission of Gale, to deliver the Dark Soul to the unnamed painter locked away in the Corvian settlement. But there is one problem with this plan. The Pygmy Lords, possessors of the blood of the Dark Soul, are as old as Gale, probably older. Their blood has dried and is unusable to paint, as the description of the blood of the Dark Soul tells us. When Gale came upon the Pygmy Lords, he discovered that their blood had long ago dried, and so consumed the Dark Soul. In a last-ditch attempt to secure a future for humanity, Gale tracked down every last Pygmy Lord and ate them, transferring their dried blood into his to course through his veins and reliquidate. But Gale knew he was no champion, that the Dark Soul would likely ruin him, and that he had little hope of safe return. When we encounter Gale post-timeskip, he's too far gone, even going hollow halfway through the battle. Gale's apparition and ripped cloak throughout the Drag Heap, his summon for the Demon Prince, all of this has been to lead you to this very moment. He aided your journey, so at the end of time you could kill him and deliver the pigment to his lady. 11 out of 10. The best Dark Souls boss to exist. Well, the best if you don't count Medea. Dark Eater Medea is a titan of a boss fight, a culmination of previous dragons tied into one, and this thing fucks. Tucked away behind an illusionary wall, this reptile has it all. I always see people talk about how Dark Souls changed them, how it helped them discover ways to cope with the stresses of daily life, and I never really got that feeling, almost as if I'd missed something. But Medea changed all that, grabbing me with his fanged jaws and dragging me, kicking and screaming, into Dark Souls video essay enlightenment. I am not over-exaggerating by any means. In the midst of winter, in my most desperate hours, I remember how I plunged my axe into that fuck-ass lizard's skull for the kill, and I am reborn with determination. I used to be, and still kinda am, a Zweihander purist. It's my favourite weapon in the series, but this scaly cunt forced my hand to switch to the Dragon Slayer axe to beat him, a weapon I now dearly cherish. I can tell you exactly how my first experience with Medea went. That's not something I can do with any other boss. I sat at my desk for 6 hours straight on a Sunday, just trying and trying and trying, and when I finally beat him, I let out an actual cry of relief, walked into the kitchen, interrupting my flatmate and his boyfriend's game of Magic the Gathering to tell them about the fight I've just won, ate an entire bag of frozen onion rings, then smoked the rest of my pack of cigarettes whilst listening to Guts' theme on repeat, and then passed out. But enough about my personal experience with Medea, it's starting to drag on. Get it? Like drag on. Medea bolsters an unbelievable 15,860 health points. To put that into perspective, that's about the health pool of Eudix Gundyr, Vought of the Boreal Valley, Crystal Sage, Abyss Watchers, Pontiff Sullivan, and Aldrich Devourer of Gods combined. That's 1/3 of the base game bosses, and like Slave Knight Gale, it's all contained within one health bar. The trick to chipping this down is to attack the head. Hitting anything but the head will deal around half the damage a headshot would deliver, eliminating the strategy of running underneath the body. While facing him head on is the objectively best option, you're also putting yourself right in the way of his swipes, bites, and breath attacks, and these really hit hard, being able to wipe away a 40 vigor health bar in a matter of seconds. Midir's size, whilst intimidating, is also one of his major weaknesses, as you can pretty easily read the attacks before they come, that is if you know what you're looking out for. The mix of fire and dark breath attacks makes for a unique take on the typical dragon fight. Not only is Midir flying around scorching the ground you stand on, but every so often he'll fire a laser of concentrated dark energy at you, combusting as it makes contact with the air around it. And God help you if you don't dodge. Getting hit with the laser is bad enough, but the follow-up explosion trail could very possibly two-hit you. An interesting thing about Midir's moveset is the combos he can pull off. Usually when fighting an enemy in Dark Souls, they take turns attacking, as in they have a set pattern of when to use each attack. But Midir throws this out of the window, pulling off some of the most complex combinations of actions, resulting in an unpredictable foe and emphasizing the direness of the situation you find yourself in. The second phase of this fight sees the use of the previous mentioned dark attacks, indicated by a charged up AoE strike. It's not too dissimilar from the first. When you get Midir down to roughly 20% health, he staggers, and you can pull off a killing riposte, significantly shortening the fight and rewarding players for surviving this long. I was split on whether to put Midir in front of Gale or vice versa in the script, because Gale is absolutely the final boss of the Ring City, but I never fight Midir first. He seems like final boss plus. It's something that From Software do a lot, have the final boss be challenging but beatable, Manus, Sword Saint Ishin, and Elden Beast, and then have a ridiculously hard side boss open up that reminds you why people hate these games. Calamite, Demon of Hatred, Melania. I haven't even spoken about the soundtrack yet, it's so dramatic, just listen. I'm not lying about how much I adore these songs, they're pretty high in my ranking on my last 6 months stats for Spotify. I love this fight. It's my favourite out of any Souls game, and beating it first try as you just watched was a feeling like no other. The fact that it can be over in just a couple of seconds of mistimed rolls, losing all the progress you built up. I hated it at first, but somewhere during those 6 hours, it felt spiritual, like the Tibetan Buddhist monks, who spend months creating sand mandala just to destroy it. Something about impermanence, about seeing all your work being flushed away in an instant, but being okay with it, being able to pick yourself back up and carry on the fight. Maybe this is the true meaning of Dark Souls, or maybe I've had too much rum for tonight. 12 out of 10. When contrasted with the bosses of Ashes of Ariandel, I feel a little bad, it's not even close. The first boss you'll fight is Champion Gravetender and the Gravetender Wolf. This is no more than a PvP invade, similar to Half-Life but with significantly less interesting moves and concept. Then midway through the fight, the Sif ripoff shows up. I think this is meant to be a staggered gank fight, but for most players the champion is already dead by the time the wolf shows up. The wolf itself is a direct clone of the Great Wolf enemies from earlier in the DLC, just with more HP and damage. Then on the complete opposite of that, Sister Freed, the only other boss in AoE, is actually pretty solid. The only criticisms I have are the length and the use of 3 different health bars and the invisible attack she often does. However, I understand that this is dodgeable and a bit of a skill issue on my end. But just because Sister Freed is a good boss, it just doesn't rank to 3 of the best bosses from Software's history. At most, I'd rank Frida above Demon Prince, but she is far from reaching the levels of Midir and Gale. Like with the level design, AoE shoots herself in the foot by not providing enough, and when the comparison is drawn between, you'd be lying to yourself to even think that Ariandel's boss roster has any chance of beating the Ringed City. I was a little stuck on what to do for the third unique point, partly because I feel like level design and bosses are the two most intrinsically important parts of a game. So I got to thinking. I've spoken about the physical, the observable and interactable. The existence of the Ringed City is there, and you've just watched me talk about it for the last 30 minutes or so. But there's an alert I feel I failed to capture thus far. The feeling, the atmosphere, for lack of a better term, the essence of the Ringed City. While I'm subject to such things, I do not handle discussing such metaphysical electricity well. There's just a part of me that's always skeptical or unable to engage in immaterialism. There's something in the air, and that thing is hard for me to verbalize. So in my final segment, which is much shorter than the previous two, I will discuss the impact of the Ringed City as the end of Dark Souls, whilst trying to capture the sentiment of the Ringed City. I hope you enjoy.
Why, where did you hear that name, love? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll tell you what I know. The Ringed City is said to be at world's end. Past this heap of rubbish as far as one can go. But you'd better think twice. The forsaken Ringed City was walled off by the gods to contain the pygmies. And the dark soul is better left well alone.
Collapsing. The natural state of all is to lay in the ground, buried. To feel the dirt and ash pile over the skin. This is where we find ourselves. Epochs churn on, and never once is a panacea discovered. To fight against it, men build their dreams and live by them. They construct their cities, their kingdoms, laws and gods, all in hope to rebel against their futile position. For some this is enough, drunk from the ale men before them had brewed. Others cannot drink, both are chained, their endings sealed. The Ringed City shows us this in its blinding truth. It does not dance around the grave, comforting you. This is it. This is the end. There is nothing left past this point. It holds up the truth to our eyes and sears them out. You can walk around and point things out you know, things you remember, but they've morphed, they've grown old and dilapidated. Whatever thread of hope you clutched onto has been severed. Even since the first game, you've been presented with the option to prolong the fire or end it, and now we gaze upon our works. We see the result of pushing a world to its limits, dragged along, stumbling and bleeding towards oblivion. We created this fate, and now all we can do is watch. The fire has faded, by this point probably extinguished, and it's time to let it burn out for good. Everything has its end, and it's more clear than ever that this universe has met its time. From the entropy of land we see, caving in on itself, to the grey dunes claiming what's left of Lordran, the life force of this place has long died. Yet, at the end of time, a slave night and an unkindled jewel, surrounded by the ashes of the fire that once kept the world alive, one cursed by the dark, and the other born from it. The vanity of the situation being known by both, there's nothing left here to save. There's something poetic about the first and last enemy you face in Dark Souls, being a hollow with a broken sword. The cyclical nature of the universe, always bringing us back to where we began, as if to sit there and laugh at us like some great cosmic joke. Look at where you've been, what you've done, and in the end, the universe is still crumbling around you. You've changed nothing. But this isn't exactly true. You've grown, and so has the world around you. There isn't a grandiose finale where all your favourite NPCs show up and congratulate you. No, this would be very out of character for Dark Souls. You're left alone. But you've survived. Survived till the very end. And now you can secure a new future. The painted world may be dwarfed by the land as we know it is now. It may not have the adventures or the boss fights, but it's something, and that's worth fighting for. There is always hope within despair. When the sun rises, it does not wait for darkness to leave. It removes it with ease, just as the painter can find light in a new world, and just as you can find light at the end of everything. The Ringed City shows us its darkness, and asks you to find hope within it. Do I think the Ringed City is perfect? No, I'm not that blinded by passion. But do I think the Ringed City is a perfect ending to Dark Souls? Absolutely.
My thanks, Ashen One. With this will I paint a world. Then I will name this painting Ash. 'Twill be a cold, dark, and very gentle place. And one day, it will make someone a goodly home.